Thank you so much for joining us for today's panel titled Launching Students into College and Keeping Them There, College Supports That Work. Well, I've worked with and referred to everyone on this panel for many years. This is our first time presenting all together, and I'm really excited to be able to collaborate with this tremendous team of experts to discuss college transition and supports. I just want to cover one housekeeping item in terms of questions that you have. We're certainly looking forward to taking questions and answers at the end of this presentation. If questions come up as we're speaking, you can feel free to put them in the Q&A feature in your Zoom. Just put them in there. We will then sort of take those in order toward the end of the presentation. We would really love to have questions that are general, that are going to be questions that are going to apply to a number of people who are watching us and learning tonight. If you have very specific questions, those are things that you might, specifically follow up through an intake or through some other ways to work with any of us, or even just follow up with presenters individually. But we will try to keep the Q&A pretty general. And you should certainly feel free to put those in there throughout. Can everybody see the slides? Okay, just wanted to double check. There's one question in the Q&A that indicates that maybe there's no picture, but I think that might be a technical issue for that. So I'm going to keep going. So again, I'm just going to start by some brief introductions of who's in the room. I call it a room, but we're obviously in a virtual Zoom space. I'm Kelly Challen. I'm a licensed guidance counselor and the director of transition services at NESCA, which is a neuropsychology and integrated treatment practice based in the Northeast United States. And I'm really honored to be here with Eric Endlich tonight, who's the founder of Top College Consultants. And he's worked with students around the world with autism, ADHD, other learning differences to help them navigate the college application process and find ideal universities for their interests and needs. Eric used to be an East Coaster, students around the globe. Going forward to our panelists. One of our panelists this evening is my colleague, Jasmine Botomo, who's a licensed special educator and executive function coach with training and certification focused on academic strategies and executive function supports for students with learning disabilities, ADHD, and autism. She spent time at Landmark College's Institute for Research and Training to get some specialized training, which is cool. Grant Berger, who's the founder and principal of Focus Collegiate and has devoted his career to supporting young adults struggling with mental health, academic, executive function, social, and transition to college and adulthood in general. Casey Schmaliker, who's the assistant director at New Frontiers Executive Function Coaching, where he spent more than a decade helping individuals build their executive function, academic and social skills while transitioning to college, workplace, and general adult life. And last but certainly not, I'm the co-founder of Virtual Hall. Jake has over 25 years of experience in a variety of educational organizations and is especially passionate about reaching students with diverse backgrounds and supporting them as they pursue post-secondary education and build meaningful adult lives. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you tonight. We're certainly talking about this transition to high school, from high school to college. So I want to start by just setting the stage a little bit. Transition from high school to college has never been seamless. We've always heard about students who struggle in first semesters. There are some universities who offer pass-fail in first semesters because it's sort of known that that transition's tough. We have the freshman 15 in terms of students going a little bit crazy with life skills when they make the transition, or you hear stories about nightmare first roommates. So it's not that was a really easy transition before, but today's high school students are different than past past generations. And I think facing some challenges that are a little bit unique. So current population estimates in the United States are that students with disabilities make up 15% of public school enrollment, a number that's really grown steadily over the past decades. And since the onset of the pandemic in about 4 years ago, we've seen many challenges for our high school students. So for students who do receive special ed services in high school, many of those services were limited or paused during the pandemic. But we're facing a nationwide teaching shortage right now, with special education positions being the most difficult to fill. So some students are not getting the specialized instruction that they really need at high school levels. Across all types of students, though, there's really been a loss of learning, right? Particularly due to times when schools closed or relied on prolonged remote learning. Students have encountered social isolation in new ways. Many of these students encountered that in middle or high school, which are really formative years. And students have missed peer experiences known to be pivotal in social identity development. And mental health issues, particularly anxiety and depression, are at, really rampant in our teenage students. So it's clear that academic, social, and emotional gap between high school and college is widening, right? And especially for our students with disabilities. While all of the students we work with are highly individual, one common area of challenge tends to be difficulty with executive function. So these are a set of processes that all have to do with managing oneself and one's resources in order to achieve a goal. Some of the executive function skills that we think about that can be challenging are things like organization of ideas, time and materials, planning and prioritization, steps to follow to reach a goal, time management, including knowing how long things will take you and then finishing things on time, task initiation and managing task avoidance, sustaining and shifting attention and effort. Working memory can be a challenge, which is the ability to hold more than one piece of information in your brain in the same time and manipulate that information in your head. That's really critical for note taking, if you think about that. Self-control of impulses and emotions. Self-monitoring is an executive function. That's like noticing when you don't understand something, noticing how your behavior impacts other people. And mental flexibility, which allows you to see gray rather than black and white, to shift your thinking about something. So these can be challenges for any of the students we work with. And in high school, there are lots of executive function demands that occur across school, home, and social activity. Things like organizing school tools, taking notes, resisting video games before work, getting your homework started, getting out of bed on time, keeping track of activities, creating social plans, balancing social activities, managing emotions through all of that. But in high school, there are also a lot of executive function supports that are baked right into school and home life, right? If we think about high schools, whether it's a private or public high school, class sizes are controlled very carefully. Class material usually comes from specific books or things the teacher's written on the board. You know where to find the material. Scheduling is usually managed by adults. Teachers tell students what they need to learn from their homework and remind them of their assignments and remind them when the due dates are coming. And teachers often, they usually check homework and provide feedback. They also check on students that they think might need extra help. So there's a lot of intervention that just happens as a result of being a high school student. There are also federal laws that require schools to find, teach, and accommodate students with disabilities. In high school, that is mandated to be provided by the school district. Reading that students are supposed to do is usually discussed in classes, so they have that sort of double check that they're understanding the material. Homework and studying time is pretty minimal. Students have, frequent tests to check comprehension of material. And parents and teachers remind students frequently of their responsibilities, help them set priorities, correct students' behavior when it's, when the behavior is unexpected. So if we really think about this is all things that are happening to support executive functioning, and they just happen as part of high school. But demands and student responsibilities and available supports are radically different in college. So I'm going to let Eric talk with you more about that.
Thanks, Kelly, and thanks for inviting me, and thanks so much for everyone for joining us. So yeah, there's a huge shift in college, and The shift isn't so much that the supports don't exist, is that the way that they're delivered and the role of the student is very different. So the one at the top, I think, is one of the most dramatic changes, and that is the reduction in the amount of structure that students experience. So often when high school students start to learn about college and they hear, oh, you might only take 4 classes or 5 classes instead of 6 or 7, and you might have a day or 2 days or 3 days during the week with no classes at all. To a high school student, that sounds great. Wow, I'm going to have a whole day where I don't have to go to class at all. That sounds, but the flip side of that is the lack of structure. So you get these large assignments that are over a longer period of time. Maybe there's a midterm and a final, maybe just a final, maybe longer papers to write. And it is up to the students to figure out how to get that stuff done. They get a syllabus at the beginning of the term that the professor provides. And it is up to the student to kind of keep track of what am I supposed to be reading this week? When is this assignment due? It's not like in high school where teachers are saying, hey, remember, there's a quiz tomorrow. Remember to, read this chapter for tomorrow. There's just more of an assumption that students are kind of responsible for themselves. Let's go to the next slide. So in addition, it says up the top, school, home, and community are integrated. Unless the student's living at home and going to community college, the home and the school are the same place. And your bedroom, that's where you're living in one room typically as a student in a residence hall, and you have to keep that space organized, not just for, food and sleep, but also for, as it says there, for study materials. And then there's all the other life skill tasks that were an issue in high school too, like getting laundry done, refilling medication, so on, except the parents aren't there to do it. So if you're thinking like, oh, but my child's never, refilled their own meds, my child's never done the grocery shopping or made a, menu plan or figured out, set up an appointment with a doctor for themselves. Well, this is stuff you don't want them to sort of drop off a service cliff when they start college. This is stuff to start addressing in high school so that it isn't such a dramatic change in college. And then there's 2 points at the bottom that I think are critical. Knowing when something isn't understood and recognizing when help is needed. So that is that self-awareness that, what, I'm confused in this class. You know what, I'm having some health symptoms that I need to get checked out. Whatever the issue is, whether it's academic, social, emotional, health, the student needs to be aware of that and then take proactive steps to get help. Again, the help and the resources are there, but it is on the student to seek them out. Let's go on to the next slide. And then there's the social emotional piece. Okay, so there's managing your feelings. You may have a disappointing experience in a class that you didn't do as well on a test as you expected. Maybe you have a disappointment in a romantic relationship, or you have a conflict with a roommate or a professor, you don't like the way a professor is interacting with you. So how are you going to handle these issues? What are your communication, conflict resolution skills? And if you have challenges with those, then do you know where to get help? Do you know how to work on those things? Of course, I don't expect that, college freshmen are going to have it all figured out. And they certainly are not going to have all their executive function skills figured out, because those are continuing to develop even beyond college. But they need to know where to get help, and they need to step up and get the help. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so what are those supports that are available in college? Kelly sort of outlined the stuff in high school, and keep in mind in high school, there's all the stuff that gets delivered at school, and there's all the sort of invisible stuff that happens at home. Maybe not invisible, but it's so automatic for parents, and I'm a parent myself. I have neurodivergent kids as well. That you may not even really consciously think, oh yeah, I'm the one who gets my kid up. I'm the one who tells them to put their homework in the backpack, to turn off their, computer at night, and, stop playing games and go to sleep, and all of those different things. There's so many things that parents are doing that they just take for granted that disappears in college. Again, there are lots of resources in college. Most colleges have free peer tutoring available, writing center, maybe a math center, health center, counseling center. academic advising, career advising. It is a long list of things, and certainly disability supports. But again, the student has to seek out those services. So disability services can be super helpful, but they do not get delivered to the student. The student has to go make an appointment, get their disability accommodation set up. Now, some colleges have something above and beyond what I just described. I know it's a lot of information, but I don't want to hog all the time here. Some colleges have dedicated, comprehensive learning support programs or autism support programs with multiple components. And then some colleges have something in between, which I call sort of like a la carte services. Like they might have academic coaching, which is what colleges typically call executive function coaching. Some colleges offer that some service. Some colleges have a more robust suite of services that will have the academic coaching plus peer mentoring, plus social skills workshops, plus social events, plus early registration for priority registration for courses, a whole bunch of great things. That is a small subset of colleges. We actually have a list. I have a list on our website of those colleges. And for some of our students, that's a make or break thing. They need those extra supports in order to get through college. Let's go on.
All right, so I'm going to introduce Nesca. I'm Jasmine. Nice to meet all of you. I work as an EF coach and educational consultant at Nesca. A little background information. It was founded in 2007. We currently have staff and offices in a few different cities in Massachusetts, and I have to read them off because I'm not in Massachusetts, in Newton, Plainville, and Hingham. We also have offices in Londonderry, New Hampshire, and then staff in Burlington, Vermont, and in Brooklyn, New York, where I am right now. And because we work both in person at those locations with clients as well as remotely, we do service families on a national and international level. The staff we have is master's and doctoral level professionals. We have a wide range of expertise, including transition specialists, occupational therapists, psychoeducational counselors, school psychologists, social workers, and of course, neuropsychologists. And Nesca does still do neuropsychological examinations, or assessments. That's how we started. But we have offered transition services since 2009 with a wide range of services. Some of those include post-secondary transition services, real life skills and pre-college coaching, counseling and services including psychotherapy, parent coaching to help parents with tools to support the needs of their neurodivergent children, and of course, executive function coaching to help with all of the EF skills that Kelly mentioned earlier, such as organization, time management, goal setting, and more. Something that we really care about is the approach that we use at Nesca, and we make sure that it is relational, student-driven, collaborative, and individualized. So that way we can make sure we have a fit between the clinician and the service provider and the client that we're working with. We have our coaches are all master level in the relevant field. So we have a really wide range of knowledge and expertise to pull from, both inside of the transition team and with the neuropsychologists on staff. And that collaboration really allows us to find the best approach for the clients that we're working with. Another really important thing that we take pride in at Nesca is that we allow flexibility in the frequency and duration of the services and sessions that we provide to clients. So that way we can really find the appropriate intensity of coaching that will fit the client and the family in their needs and in their abilities. So there's no minimum requirement of sessions that families need to sign up for. We can kind of adapt it as the needs change for the client. And overall, we just make sure that we want to create a safe and welcoming and open environment for our clients. And we use the versatility and the different skill sets that we have at Nesca to find the best approach for our clients. Thank you.
Oh, I guess I'm up. So Good evening, everyone. My name is Grant. I am the founder and principal of an organization called Focus Collegiate, and Kelly and Eric has done an excellent job in kind of the setup of why we exist and why I started it. Was largely to address the gap and the challenges that they had talked about in terms of the differences between what happens in high school in terms of supports and then what happens on the college campus. And what we found is that students who have been largely supported in their home environment and their secondary environment come to college and they experience something that's drastically different that they have to adapt to. And it takes a lot more skill and a lot more ability for the student to have flexible thinking about how they learned habits that they were trained for in the secondary environment and how there's now a lack of prompts and a lack of parenting that's actually happening in the post-secondary environment. And so what Focus Collegiate does is provides these comprehensive supports for students who have got into a traditional college and are complex learners, so they have had a lot of supports that have been around them that are going to be fundamentally different when they land on the college campus. And even if the college campus is providing more enhanced services, as Eric mentioned, it's incumbent upon the student to get themselves to the service. And sometimes that's the friction. And so this is where we find where our team has the ability to not only serve the student in their area or their area of need, but also encourage the student to be motivated enough to take advantage of the on-campus services, because oftentimes that is somewhat the friction. Because ultimately, our students, once they are able to take advantage of on-campus services and navigate the post-secondary environment, they are going to have success. The challenge is just getting there. And so, and like NESCA, our model is focused on relationships and ultimately gaining independence. And for many of our students, that can mean academic independence. It can mean socially competent on their campus. It can mean achieving a well-balanced life balance skills, for example, sleep hygiene, these types of things. There's a lot of things that get in the way of a proper transition to college. And so therefore, we have to be prepared, as we are as an organization, to address anything that arises. Well, how do we do that? Well, we serve students who we have two different tiers of services. One for students who are attending Boston area colleges, and we actually go to their campuses and serve them on their campuses in person. But the other 70% of the students that we serve are students who are remote and on campuses throughout the country. And we have relationships with over 100 different college campuses because we have such a variety of students attending their own college of choice. They got in, that's their dream, that's their parents' dream. We want to try to make it happen. But how do we do that? Well, it's not exactly easy, but our core principle is really operating in an unbounded format. So we don't count hours necessarily. We just say, we're going to help the student in whatever capacity we need to at the time. And what that is helpful in is that there is, as Jasmine said, with NESCA, there's no limits on frequency and duration, which limits some of the friction, because if a student needs help now, we need to be able to give them help now, because as our students, and I imagine many of your young people quickly can get behind. And then once they're behind, they're overwhelmed. And so I feel like our job in life is to help students with learning differences not get behind. The other way that we are, I think, pretty sufficient in this case is that all of our team are dedicated full-time specialists, and they all have master's degrees plus. But the more important thing is they all have experience in higher ed. Many of the staff at Focus Collegiate are former disability service directors of college campuses. So our team really understands and they live and breathe higher ed. And that's why we're focused just on higher education or post-secondary education. And the other way that we achieve the unbounded support is that we have a very low staff to student ratio. So that's really 7 to 1 is the upper end. And each student gets a collegiate life specialist and a collegiate learning specialist to go along on this team model. So there's never a gap because someone's on vacation or they win the lottery. As I mentioned, we're designed to reduce the need for service over time. So we're working our students towards independence. So therefore, we step down our services that are based on once a student is able to demonstrate success. But the other reality is students will bounce back between success and not. And so we have to have the capability to serve a student when they're struggling. And that might mean an unlimited amount of time one week, and then a student is coasting the next week. And that's kind of the design of Focus Collegiate, is to be responsive, which is the idea behind Unbounded. The other thing that is a signature of what we do is our summer cohort. And that's our 3-week experience where students can come to Boston on the Simmons University campus and learn and demonstrate some of their capabilities and capacity for attending their college of choice. And this is also diagnostic for us, because our students often, we end up serving them in the fall. So we know where a student is going to be at that point. And I can be remiss without saying that a large portion of what we do is also parent support, because our parents are not, the student is not the only entity in this transaction, and parents oftentimes need their own support on how do I help my student, when do I let go. Parents have been used to really not over-functioning for a student, but certainly it's not in a parent's job description to allow the young person to fail under their roof. And so how do we let go as parents? And that's where we come in, because we have a distinct advantage that we're not the parents, but we're also specialists in what we do. So I appreciate the time. Hopefully I didn't go over. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. So Casey, I'm from New Frontiers Executive Function Coaching. So we are going into our 12th year now. We were founded back in 2012. Similarly, we are serving people nationally, internationally. A majority of our supports are virtual, with some in-person supports as needed, but the flexibility that's provided by virtual services, we find really helps target the supports to students. So like when you're thinking about just timing of sessions, you can have a 15-minute session if you're virtual, but if you're in person, you might be traveling more just to get a 15-minute session, which could limit that service delivery. And also one of the most important things that we find with the virtual piece is appropriate coach matching. So matching up with someone, not based off of who's geographically close by, but who's really going to be the best fit. And so by being able to choose from a bench of coaches nationally, we're able to really tailor these supports to the actual student. We focus on very high level. We're focusing on those executive functions, which we describe them as those goal-directed behaviors, the things that orient us and help us adapt towards goals. But we work on, with everyone we work with, growth mindsets, problem-solving skills, and developing that grit and resilience. It's a high focus on the process of learning and adapting instead of just what is it that we're learning. And the purpose of that is really to help generalize those skills. So sometimes when I'm talking to parents, we're not about just providing solutions. If that's what you're looking for, that's not us. I look for struggle when I'm working with students. I want them to struggle, because when they struggle, they want to adapt. And that is what we're trying to push for. Okay, now let's go through that process of learning about ourselves and learning new things, not because someone told us to, but because we want to alleviate that struggle. That's the process of a lifelong skill. Our coaching staff is diverse. While a lot of the individuals that are doing our coaching come from social work backgrounds, psychology backgrounds, education backgrounds, we don't limit it to people with a specific degree. And just for our approach, because we're doing such expansive supports through the lifespan, what we look for is these things that you can't train people in. A lot of our core values of like empathy, creativity, really view it, the things that are hard to train people in. So we have, like, one of our best coaches is an MFA in creative writing, and that's able to target specific students that he relates to. Reason why I just brought up executive functions as goal-directed behaviors is that is the lens that we provide all of our supports to. I'll be honest, I don't know how coaching happens not through an executive function lens. It just is how you coach. It's how you navigate people, at least how I view it. And so when we're working with people, we always start off with, and this is sometimes what we explain to parents, Our supports are not about achieving your goals as parents. Our supports are about figuring out the goals that motivate the students. Because oftentimes you'll see students that struggle with executive function in one area in academics, but not in their social life. Is it really executive dysfunction then, or is there some goal setting? So we support people in all of these different goal areas of academics, social communication, life management, career readiness, and then more professional career skills, and then also just parenting. And so the goal is to help foster that independence. And we mostly are doing this through one-on-one supports. Really, we are a very client-centric methodology. I know a lot of people sometimes want the answer, but everyone has a different answer. And that's kind of our philosophy when we're approaching individuals. And so when people come in, we always start off with an initial consultation without parents. We don't want any bias there. You guys have your own time to talk to us, but this consultation is to really see what's motivating them. What is motivating the student? What do they think they're struggling with? And a lot of this ties back to this overarching skill of problem-solving skills. Too often society jumps in to provide solutions, but there's no buy-in on if there's a problem. And then we wonder why supports aren't sticking. You have to get that buy-in of what they are seeing as problems and working from there. That's often like the concept of meet them where they're at. And so that consultation, what we're really trying to pull out is focus goal areas for them. Where is buy-in? Where can we start working with them where they want it? Because they all want agency. They want control over their lives. And just another support telling them what they need to work on you're not gonna gain traction. We're also trying to identify that ideal coach profile. Just like we're trying to give agency on the goals they want to work on and work towards, we're also trying to figure out, who do you want to work with? What style of person? Do you need someone that's a little firmer? Do you need someone that's more supportive? What are you going to respond to? And then lastly is that service recommendation. So similarly to some of the other panelists, we really individualize that tailored support. Sometimes what someone needs is 15 minutes every single day. Let's just plan out what we're doing every single day. What do we need to review? Let's go in 15 minutes, make a plan, see you tomorrow. Other times people are going to need 5 hours, an hour every single day. We got to go through work together. But this is where we're coming up with that balance between intensity and frequency. And often it's a mixture between the two. What I often will say is, if there really is an executive function challenge, having more frequent sessions tends to be more beneficial than one longer session because you're getting more touch points with them. But in general, we're tailoring that for each individual that comes in, and we type this all up into a coaching plan so that we can all be on the same page of what services will look like. So we can know internally, parents can understand, and then also the student actually is seeing, like, what am I agreeing to? What does this actually look like? Because that communication and all being on the same page is so important.
Hi, thanks so much for taking the time this evening, and thanks everyone else for what you've already added to the conversation. My name is Jake Weld. I am with both Mansfield Hall and Virtual Hall. Mansfield Hall is comprehensive residential collegiate support. We are working with students in a residential model in Burlington, Vermont, Madison, Wisconsin, and Eugene, Oregon. We also provide a supported study abroad option in England, but Mansfield Hall is providing academic and social and independent living skill support to college students. We're providing a comprehensive wraparound academics support model, social support model. The way I describe this to students is as the super dorm. We are very much an alternative to a traditional college dorm. The college dorm part of this is that it's college students living together and attending the local colleges in each of these 3 great college towns. The super part of that super dorm is all of the added and integrated academic, social, independent living skill support, which is really being offered in a reach-in model. So, Eric started talking out about the transition from high school to college and how so much of that transition is about helping students learn how to access services that are available in the community or on a college campus. What Mansfield Hall is able to do is to provide a reach-in model while students are learning how to use the student-activated model that's available to them in the world. So really helping provide a bridge from the home and high school experience into the college and independent experience. So that's Mansfield Hall, the comprehensive residential model. And then Virtual Hall is a comprehensive coaching model. So remote coaching. So we are in Virtual Hall, we are providing academic, executive functioning, and college life coaching. This is available to students who are attending college anywhere in the country. That might be a couple of community college classes while still staying at home, or at an Ivy League university totally on their own, and everything in between. But we're providing 3 to 4 hours a week of individualized, dedicated coaching time, and really helping students hone in on that goal setting process like you've been hearing about, the executive functioning, the planning, prioritizing, task analysis, task initiation, and then also helping integrate all of that with not only the academics and the writing support that they might need in college, but also college life writ large. So Mansfield Hall and Virtual Hall, two support models. Mansfield Hall is the comprehensive residential model in Burlington, Vermont, Madison, Wisconsin, and Eugene, Oregon. And Virtual Hall is remote coaching for college students going to college anywhere in the country. Thanks so much. Look forward to continuing the conversation.
Hard act to follow. These are all great companies that I have known of and referred students and families to for years. So I am Eric Endlich. I use he, him pronouns. I am the founder of Top College Consultants. I'm a clinical psychologist by training with many, many years of experience in the mental health field. Love working. I've always liked working with teens. And when I kind of discovered that there was this possibility of this career that involved just working with kids on the college process, I'm like, that sounds like even more fun than being a therapist. So I do this full time. Our team, so I manage a team of consultants. We have students all over the country and sometimes in other countries as well. And we pretty much all work virtually. So, I have students from coast to coast. When I say we have a diverse team, and we have come from different backgrounds. I have a mental health background. Another person on the team, Alicia Paul, who's in Atlanta, also has a mental health background. I've got a consultant in Massachusetts with a college transfer admissions background, a few folks on the team who worked in high schools. So, and we bring our collective skills to work with students on the college application process. Primarily, we're working with high school students applying to college. Occasionally, we get college students looking to transfer to a different college or college grads looking to apply to grad school. I love working with students applying to grad school, but it's mostly high school students on that college transition. I love starting with them as early on as possible. At this point, I'm only open for freshmen anyways. But when we start in freshman or sophomore year, we can focus on course selection, summer planning, extracurriculars, career exploration. We don't talk about college until they get to junior year. And then we start getting into building that college list. And then in that summer before senior year, actually working on the essays and the Common App and other platforms like the UC app, or depending on where they're applying to college. Virtually all of our students are neurodivergent, so they either have learning differences like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, learning disabilities, or mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, etc. Some of our students have been hospitalized. As a clinical psychologist, I'm very comfortable with students with mental health challenges. And so families come to us because of our expertise in knowing which colleges have those support programs, which colleges are more inclusive, what's the difference between these different levels of support. If you just go on college tours, every college is going to make it sound like they can serve your kid, but they're not all interchangeable. Disability accommodations is not the same as services. Learning support is not the same as autism support. So, we make it our business to know the colleges and to know the programs. So we're also helping not only just with the college applications, but, family says, hey, can you help us find a summer program to help our kid get ready for college? Focus Collegiate has a summer program. So we refer families to summer programs, gap year programs, PG or post-grad year programs to help kids be fully college ready before they start. I wrote an article last year called Getting into College is the Easy Part, because it's so easy to focus on what do I need to do to get in, that it's easy to overlook what do we need to do to get through and get out the other end. And so we really focus on college readiness. Are these students ready? If not, what do they need in order to get ready? What kind of supports do they need in high school? What kind of skills do they need to work on in high school? Do they need a gap year, et cetera? And we help with the whole process of, understanding college disability accommodations and so on, which can be very confusing. I mentioned that we're neurodiversity affirming. I said earlier, I'm a parent of neurodivergent students, and I'm neurodivergent myself, as are some of the team members. And neurodiversity means that we see learning differences like autism and ADHD as simply being our brains are all different and wired differently. I don't see it as necessarily a deficit or a disorder. Sure, they can present certain challenges, not denying those challenges. A lot of those challenges have to do with trying to fit into a world that was kind of designed for neurotypical people. And, obviously, if you have ADHD, sitting in a classroom all day long and sitting still and keeping quiet may not come naturally to you. So that is a sort of a fit between you and the environment. So we are really kind of trying to play to students' strengths. What are their strengths? What are they interested in? What are they good at? And not, because a lot of them have been challenged over the years by being bullied or feeling marginalized, feeling like I'm a special ed kid and students make fun of me. So we want to help them discover their strengths and find their place in college. And so many kids talk about the challenges in high school, and I often find myself reassuring them that a lot of things are going to get better in college. But it's got to be the right college, and they have to be ready for college. So I will pause there, and let's get into talking about some not actual students, but actual scenarios. And I do have some comments about the funding questions, but I wanted to let other folks answer those too, because I don't want to speak for you as far as how your students get funded. But I will say that I encourage families to explore public benefits like vocational rehabilitation, Medicaid. There's different states have different names of agencies. So in Massachusetts, DMH and DMR. In California, it's the regional centers. There's different benefits available, but sometimes if you can become a client of one of these agencies, that can fund a lot of support programs and sometimes even college tuition. So if you're thinking, oh, my kid's not that disabled, or we make too much money, you'd be surprised how many students can get covered by these programs. Shall we go on to the case examples? Is there anything you want to say, Kelly, or should I jump in?
Yeah, I think we can head into the case examples. I think one of the things that we haven't necessarily talked about, but I hope is kind of clear, is that one of the reasons a lot of our programs exist is that even though there are many schools that offer accommodations or a support program or even an autism support program that's very specific for certain students. Sometimes the level of support that you need or that your child needs isn't at the college that has the best major or the culture or or the electives that are the clubs that are going to be the most motivating. I mean, I'm somebody who picked my college for an a cappella group, so I'm not a great example of how to pick a college, but but sometimes exactly what you want in your college selection isn't at the school that has the exact LD program that actually happens to be the best fit for your kid. And so what we're, wanting to talk about and being able to share tonight are just a variety of support options that exist that allow you to sort of mix and match, what the student needs with a particular college environment that also provides what the student needs. And I think that's one of the exciting things. Oftentimes a parent may come in and say, we want to make sure we pick the college that has the best LD program for our kid. And that's a really limiting thing to do because that's a very small list of colleges. So I'm excited to be able to kind of talk about some different scenarios tonight and how some of our different strategies and ways for handling that. So Eric, go ahead and jump on in.
That's a really good point. Just to underline what Kelly just said, families will often come to us saying, yes, we want, our kid is going to need a support program. And I might generate a list at the beginning of a bunch of colleges with support programs. By the time we get to applying in fall of senior year, I'm lucky if there's one college left on the list with a support program, because it, as Kelly said, it intersects with all of these other needs. I have 2 students this year who are planning to become ornithologists. That's bird scientists, 2 this year. That's pretty specific. I have students, who will say they want to study aeronautical engineering or cybersecurity or game design. These are majors that, you can only find at certain colleges. So, and then parents who say, oh, my kid can't be more than a 2-hour drive from home, or the college can't cost more than a certain amount, or can't be more than a certain size. So once you add on all these factors, you often end up with a list of colleges that doesn't have support programs, which is where these folks come in. In fact, I have a student who's going to be starting college in the fall, going to Mansfield Hall in Burlington, Vermont.
I think you have one coming with us too. So
probably,
or maybe
yes. That too. So yeah, and I see a lot of questions about affordability. Again, I don't want to speak for other folks. I do work with students pro bono every year if I can. So we definitely work to make our services affordable and help families find ways to fund the supports they're getting, as well as helping kids find scholarships in college. I didn't mention that, but I've helped kids get full ride scholarships where everything was paid for. And I've helped families appeal financial aid and get so much more financial aid that it paid for our services many times over. But let's get into the students. So Rayansh, 12th grade student, current diagnoses of ADHD and dyslexia, high social and emotional intelligence. Good to hear. A's and B's in first 2 years of high school. So there's the academic abilities, social and emotional abilities. Missed a few assignments in 11th grade, was able to make them up with parent support. Now missing major assignments in all classes, especially history and English. Surprised when he failed a sports nutrition test last week, which used to be a favorite class. In a constant state of crisis and overwhelm, but attributes each challenge/failure to a unique and unrelated circumstance. Teachers adore him, but aren't sure how to help him. Oh, Rayansh, dude, you're doing so well. Obviously, lots of great stuff here. Academically capable, likable student who is doing well, who's well-liked, but doesn't seem to understand what's going on. So I'm just going to throw it out to the group as to kind of this student, you get a call from a parent who describes this student to you. What's your response, and what would you offer this student?
I'm happy.
Yeah.
You go ahead, Casey.
I could pick on you, but I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna have to. Go ahead, Casey.
So first thing is his house is on fire. That's the perception. Everything's falling apart. Before we try to figure out what's wrong, you got to get the fire out of the house. You're not going to talk about the insulation. Is it flammable while the fire's burning? You got to put out the fire. And then from there, really either start talking to them. First thing that jumps out to me is, this started your senior year. Did you get into college? Are we checking out a little bit? But trying to figure out it, just talk to them once the fires are out. Like, the problem's solved. We don't need to hide things. What might be going on? And he might really have no idea about what's going on. And from there, I would just move forward a little bit on what are we saying we're going to do, like in terms of coaching supports, if we got in after everything was settled. What's our intention for this sports exam that's coming up? How are you going to study? Did you actually do it? And what you're doing is you're starting to figure out what led to that. Probably everything falling apart at the end was one mistake snowballed, and then there was no fixing it. And what we want to do is figure out, A, what was that one mistake? And B, where was the adaptability gap on executive functions to bounce back from that? There's no one problem that can derail us totally. What often happens is how we react to it. And so just to kind of sum up, at least like from our approach, we'd get in there, we'd let them know, help is here, don't worry. We're not going to try and point blame as to what the problem was. Let's solve these things, get stable, and then just through forming a relationship, which hopefully by that point of putting out all the fires, he's like, yeah, these people are good. They know how to help. But then from there, forming that relationship to try and help with that self-monitoring of identifying the problems before they become overwhelming.
I wanted to piggyback on what you said, Casey, about after you've got the fire taken out of the house, to kind of do a lot of that self-monitoring and self-reflection. This seems like a student that would really benefit from metacognitive training or psychoeducation, especially because they mention that, he may be in a constant state of overwhelm and crisis, but he kind of sees each crisis as a separate, isolated event and may not be connecting the dots about some underlying executive function struggles or other academic struggles that are contributing to one crisis after another. So I would really make that the focus of our coaching together, which is really lovely to be able to do with the one-on-one model that I know a lot of our organizations have. I also wonder if it would be worth exploring how his high social and emotional intelligence may have masked some of his struggles earlier on, even before his senior year. And the fact that a lot of his teachers love him. I've had a lot of students in my work in the public schools where they are so charming and so lovely, and it's such a strength of theirs that you can forget that they're actually struggling with their reading or they're struggling with their study skills. So I think that would also be a really good place to bring the self-reflection of where are the things that you might actually be struggling with and how can we give you the support that you deserve, and you don't need to kind of mask over those struggles.
Right. Yeah, and I would say in a perfect world, there would be no fire in the first place. The support would have been so seamless from the beginning that there would just be maybe a few sparks that would be put out. Do I take this to mean you want to go on to the next one, Kelly?
I figured.
Or should we give
since
Grant or Jake a chance to
I wasn't
speak?
sure with Grant and Jake not jumping in. I kind of figured we'd move on to a college one.
Okay, yeah. So Mikey, freshman at out-of-state, they, them pronouns, freshman at out-of-state private college, current diagnosis of autism, history of anxiety, highly intelligent, was attending gaming club but dropped out mid-semester, can't keep up with assignments, forgets to check email or Canvas, recently failed 2 midterm exams, having trouble managing fringe responsibilities like add drop deadlines, setting up meds, use of accommodations, office hours, class registration for spring, etc. So some positive things here. Again, highly intelligent, joined a club, but didn't stay in the club. And I think with a lot of these students, if you sort of look at all of it, it does hang together, even though these might be hypothetical not real students. There's a pattern here. So what would you offer this student who's in college, and how would you address this? Should we give?
Go ahead,
I
Grant.
think this is,
Go ahead, Grant.
tailor-made for us. So this is when you normally get the phone call, and the phone call is probably coming too late, I'll just say. But at the end of the day, I think as with the previous, like trying to investigate and try to increase the student's self-assessment capability, like what are they really seeing what's going on here, and ultimately what are their goals, and how are we going to tailor an intervention, if you will, to try to meet the student's goals. Because I think sometimes if a student gets in the overwhelmed, then their motivation decreases to try to rise to the occasion. And so how do you access that part of the student? And I think the other point that I would make here too is that, as I said in the beginning, I think having a student not get behind in the first place is the most successful tactic. But when they are behind, one would hope that you are trying to access that resiliency capacity that they've demonstrated somewhere in the run-up to higher ed, so that they can pivot to productivity or something that is going to be more successful. Otherwise, it tends to be a series of compounding and kind of demoralizing or demotivating things. And so, but in order to really achieve that, you have to focus on just a couple of things. And what we do at Focus Collegiate is we work on a learning support agreement where because there's a universe of things to work on. Everyone can work on everything, but in fact, we have to identify the things that are the most pervasive and really target them. And once a student starts having success in small ways, then oftentimes the momentum will pick up and they'll have success more broadly, or we can address the other things. But I think, like Casey said, the whole house can't be on fire. So, and if it is, you have to focus on just the things where a student is going to have success quickly and in the short term.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, I knew you'd be all over this one. Great. It's Jake or anyone else want to?
Yeah, sure. So, in many ways, I'll answer this in sort of both threads, the Mansfield Hall answer and the virtual hall answer. In many ways, Mikey, as a college student, thinking about what might happen with them as they transition to college. Mikey's parents are the parents who probably called Mansfield Hall in the spring of his junior year, looking downstream into college, recognizing that Mikey is neurodivergent and might need some additional supports because some of these challenges might have been predictable or something that they were worried about. And in so many ways, starting those conversations early, coming to look at Mansfield Hall as senior year, fallen in love with the living and learning community and making that transition to avoid this very scenario, right? And that's sort of how and why the virtual or the Mansfield Hall, the residential model, that might have been Mikey's path. About 75% of Mansfield Hall's students are what I would call true freshmen, that we really are their first year into college and independence. And so, a lot of what Mansfield Hall is there to do is to mitigate against this and build some experience and skills to avoid this very scenario. About 25% of Mansfield Hall students are the Mikeys of the world who tried college independently and are coming back to the table for some additional support in order to re-engage and get sort of restarted from a more successful foundation. So that's the Mansfield Hall answer. The virtual hall answer, in many ways, I think Grant nailed it. Understanding what's going on, I think being curious, asking more questions, learning, where are the sticking points, and doing some triage to help identify, what is our immediate goal? Is our immediate goal to pass classes? Is our immediate goal to be socially connected? What are the critical elements? Working with Mikey and Mikey's family to really, build a comprehensive plan to support a student. So, two different answers, two different tracks, and a third track of avoiding this very story for Mikey by calling early.
And then
I do want to
Go ahead,
add
Jasmine.
something here, yeah, about the current diagnosis of autism and history of anxiety. I think a profile like this is a perfect candidate for collaboration, because if we can work together with, if they have a mental health provider, we can work together with the neuropsychologist who wrote the report or may have given the autism diagnosis to better kind of understand the inner workings or the root of a lot of these kind of buildup of overwhelm. I think that will definitely shift the way that we choose to address these problems. And if they have a history of anxiety, I would also say that the relationship building is really important, because a lot of college students experience this overwhelm, and it can be really helpful to have a trusted adult who's not your parent, who you're never going to believe as a college student, but another adult tell you this is normal, this is okay, college is hard, and to kind of normalize that and help with that anxiety piece could be really beneficial.
And then just to like bring it in like very technical, like if I had this student as in a consultation I was doing, what this screams to me, and this is often something like we said, the call, right? This is what a parent might share over. I would be exploring in that consultation, do you know what to do? At any given moment, do you know what to do today? Do you know what you need to do over this week? Do you know what you need to do over 2 weeks? So just the awareness of tasks. And then the next piece is when you say you want to do it, okay, 7 o'clock, you're going to dinner. Can you activate? So that's that initiation. So great. You're a really smart student. You have a midterm coming up. But if you can't start studying at 7 p.m. when you say you're going to, then of course you're going to fail the exam because the plan isn't coming to fruition. The third piece, which I don't think this would happen for this student, he sounds smart. He sounds like he's gotten through here. So these failing the 2 midterms exams really sounds more like initiation and planning, but you wouldn't want to cross off how do you study? So like not only when are you going to do it, not only can you do it when you want to, but lastly, what are you actually doing? How does that look like? I would say that it'd probably be more pervasive if it was about the how of studying, but the common thread here seems to be knowing what to do and when and actually following through with it. And the services would slowly go through. Let's make a plan first, then shoot a text message over. Hey, you said you were going to start studying at 7 o'clock in the library. Where are you? Send a selfie. Try to make it a little fun so it's not like Big Brother. But trying to get that to really pinpoint, are you sitting down for an hour like you say, or like you wanted to see if it's just that activating to actually get things done.
Oh, good. We're going to get to talk about the other students. And by the way, for anyone who joined somewhat later, we are planning to leave time for live Q&A. So I know we didn't get to all the questions in writing, but yes. So Gabby, they, them pronouns, sophomore health science major at local state college, current diagnosis of ADHD, history of social anxiety. Open dialogue at home about differences in learning style, organizational style, etc. Has taken a deep dive into learning about themselves, their brain, and neurodiversity in general since being diagnosed in high school. Uses academic and housing accommodations, has monthly academic coaching through disability support on campus, still has moments of stress and overwhelm, worried about post-college planning, wishes they had someone to guide them through the day-to-day. I would love to work with Gabby. They sound like a wonderful student, and they remind me of students I have worked with. Some really positive notes here. This open dialogue at home, that the family is talking about their learning differences and their style. It's not swept under the rug. Secondly, they've worked on learning about themselves and their differences. I see students like this who want to study psychology, neuropsychology, neuroscience, etc. Uses academic accommodations, right? So they have these accommodations and they are using them. Sure, they have their challenge. The fact that they're worried about post-college planning, I don't want to see anybody worry. It's not useful, but or pleasant, but it means that they're invested, that they care, that they're not just partying and having fun in college. They're thinking about their future. And they wish they had someone to guide them through the day-to-day. So they know that they need more support. So it sounds like, Gabby sounds like they are open to what else might be out there. So, folks, you hear about a student like this. What do you, where would you come in and what would you recommend?
I could share over quickly. Low touch point. It sounds like confidence building, worrying. Maybe worry isn't the best phrase, but there should be a little stress. Stress isn't a bad thing. Like anxiety is bad. Stress is normal. And so a lot of what she's sharing is just normal feelings of learning how to cope and move forward. So you want to balance not becoming too much of a security blanket. I've had students like this that every decision, is this right? Is this right? Is this right? And that's not supporting them. So finding the right balance of a coach that can form a relationship that they can trust to say, you got this, make your decision. It's okay. Sometimes we don't know if it'll be the wrong decision, but is it the end of the world? Probably not, and we'll bounce back. So a lot of this sounds more like affirmative coaching of you got this, more so than corrective. And I think that would be really important, that everything she's feeling is very normal. And that process of dealing with those emotions. And so part of it might be therapeutic, but it doesn't sound so acute that it like needs an intervention like that. But the coaching role would really be just someone that it sounds like she just needs to bounce her ideas off of. And someone to affirm that she's successful and to keep it up. Like, all I would say as a disclaimer, the coach would have to be well trained to make sure they don't become that permanent security blanket. And anyone here I know would have that, but that's one of the important things, is not to fall into that trap as a parent where you're just saying everything is okay for every single decision. Because that could cause a problem where then you really will need us, because now they're so paralyzed by making decisions.
I don't necessarily have something to add to that, but to point out that this case feels very different than previous cases because we're no longer in the house is on fire. And I think one of the biggest factors in that is, like Eric pointed out, the open dialogue at home and the self-reflection piece that has already happened. If you notice in the other cases where the house was on fire, we all kind of echoed, we're going to have to do some self-reflection and some metacognitive training here. So that is such a huge piece of the coaching that I think we all do, is helping students know themselves, know their demands, know their environments, and then have that independence to adapt in a way that's appropriate for them to whatever their life circumstances may be moving forward.
Jasmine, I agree with you. One of the best takeaways from that vignette, I think, is the open dialogue on that home. And one of the things that we do, and I can't believe I'm going to shill another product right here, is there is a card deck called Talking College, and they're specifically for students with learning differences. And they're designed to be used at home kind of as students are preparing to go to college. So parents and students are on the same page. And we actually send them out pre-Focus Collegiate enrollment because we want to make sure that that this dialogue is happening at home, because it's one of the areas of greatest strength when students actually pivot to college, is that parents have talked about what these things might be happening and what their plausible response might be, which ultimately is, you know, a pathway to independence for the whole family and for the students. So Talking College is the name of the card.
It's funny, we do something, so we don't use that card deck, Grant, although we will now. But a lot of families that I work with, we talk about purchasing a copy of The Naked Roommate. students don't always want to talk through those scenarios with parents. So sometimes that is something that students are reading and either talking with their coach about. Sometimes they're reading it and talking about some of the scenarios with parents, or sometimes they're just reading it independently, depending on the student. But I feel like something that's so tricky for students in high school is picturing what college actually truly looks like, right? Not just like the movies, but really understanding some of the real challenges that they're going to face and kind of gearing up for that and understanding how they themselves would handle it, because each student's going to respond differently in a different situation. So I think that previewing is really important. I think we should move on to some questions, a little bit of the Q&A. Eric, if you don't mind, one of the questions that I saw that I think would be great to kick off with, it was from Donna, and she said, excellent point about studying. High school does not teach students to study. And I think I see this less and less since the pandemic hit. I think students have more reduced homework, fewer tests. I feel like the difference in demands for studying is really quite different between high school and college. And there's a question about how each program might help a student with studying or with learning to study.
I mean, it's that is one of many skills that it would be great if students learned in high school, and life skills. Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The educational environment in the secondary level has changed fundamentally in the last couple of years. There's for a long time been a gap between post-secondary education expectations and requirements and what we're seeing, especially for students who might have an IEP or have learning differences. Those study skills may not be stressed or taught in the same kinds of ways in the secondary environment. And so I think all of us can talk a little bit, if needed, about the specific study skills we offer, but it is, I think safe to say, a universal element of all of our services, that what we are providing students in a coaching model or in a residential model or in a remote coaching model or a summer program or all of the above, is certainly building that self-awareness and that self-monitoring, but also building that toolkit, right? Putting more arrows in the quiver of skills, and the skills of studying, the skills of reading, learning how to read for information as opposed to just reading for enjoyment, right? These are different things. Learning how to listen to a lecture, learning how to use the accommodations that might be available to a student, things like access to professor notes or the ability to record a lecture. These are all and learning how to use these tools are all teachable, learnable, masterable skills. And I think that we're all integrating elements of this into the support that we're providing, because we see it as a huge need for students coming out of high school and transitioning into life post-secondary.
And I just want to add to that study skill learning happens best as a preview to college when the overwhelm is not as high. I think a lot of times I have to wait. If I have a family start working with me when they're already, the house is on fire and we're just in triage mode, I might have to wait until the summer after freshman year to really dive into those study skills, because prior to that, they just don't have the bandwidth because they're just trying to kind of survive their freshman year and get through the day to day. So I do think it's really great if families and students can take the time a little bit earlier in college when things aren't as chaotic to really dive into those study skills.
And I'm surprised you didn't say, Jasmine, I was gonna steal your line. This term metacognition that has come up a lot is so essential to developing study skills. Some of the best people that succeed in college weren't taught study strategies. They found their study strategies, and metacognition is how you find your own study strategies. So when we're talking about teaching these skills, it's not this is the best way to study. You got to first start. Are you a visual learner? Are you more auditory? With simple questions, like when you're answering a question, do you see it in your head or do you hear it in your head? You can tap into what works better for them. Sometimes they're like, part of this is top-down learners versus bottom-up learners. Do you remember details and then form a bigger picture, or do you need the bigger picture to file your details? This informs the best study strategy for people. So that first step is understanding their brain. And then one thing that not to speak for everyone, but I think is non-negotiable is active studying. Do not just reread things, because there's no self-monitoring as an executive function there. All it is I reread it twice. There's no strategy involved with that. There's no focusing, and sometimes figuring out what motivates them. A lot of my students, especially like ADHD, they get competitive. Not to make too big of generalizations, but I see a little competitive streak. So sometimes I'll motivate them by make a practice test and come up with how your professor is going to try and trick you. Make trick questions. That level of thinking through, perspective taking, what might they ask? Oh, there's one long answer question. Let's go through the material and pick out 5 potential long answer questions. This is what quote unquote neurotypical, hate the term, but this is what people who are navigating this independently are doing, but we're never taught. And all of our supports are about taking that, capturing that, and now let's teach the mechanics of what would I do in their shoes. I'd go through, how are they tricking me? What is the best way? And you're just pulling that out and making that concrete and tangible so that they can learn that process.
Kelly, can I add one more thing if you're not going to shoot me? One study skill that we find is the most lagging with our students who are pivoting from high school to college is mastery of the learning or course management system on campus. We all spend an inordinate amount of time helping a student try to navigate that. And so whatever a parent or a student can do to prepare themselves to independently navigate kind of a course management system, a Moodle, something that has an integrated email, calendar, and not on a student's terms because they're going to the school, so they don't get to dictate what it is. So learn what the school is going to provide in terms of course management system and try to master that prior to landing on campus is one of the #1 things we spend. And it's not a study skill, but it is a discrete skill that's absolutely imperative. It's
Well, and
core
also
executive functioning, right? I mean, it is basically the executive functioning kind of guide, I guess, on campus.
Well, and the best part about taking the time to master that is mastering the inefficient Moodle systems that the college campuses may have, or when there's gaps in it and things aren't posted. There's so many times that my students will get frustrated, like, I did everything right, I checked all the things, and it's just not there. So I think that's also really helpful if they can know where the basics are to look, so that when those hiccups happen, it's not going to be as jarring.
Can I pick a question, Kelly?
Eric,
Yeah,
I think
do you have,
Eric's
you have
got
one
some
in
picked
mind,
out. Do you
Jake?
have them,
No,
Eric?
that's okay. Which one did you want to?
I'm just fascinated to hear people's answers, and I think it's a really important question given the prevalence of mental health challenges that students are going through. The question asks, the question is, why not counseling versus coaching? And I think teasing that out a little bit about what is the Venn diagram overlap? What is the differentiation? And I got to pick the question, so I'm not going to start with the answer, although I certainly have my own answer, but I'm really curious what folks think about this. And thank you for letting me pick one of the questions.
Sure.
I would say it depends on the goal. If there is severe mental health challenges, and I'm not going to steal this, Adele Diamond, like a leader in neuroscience behind executive functions, I literally asked this before, and she's always said, work on the mental health piece first. You can't, goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you're feeling unsafe, if you're anxious, you're not going to do these self-actualization skills of executive functions. And they're not sexy skills to work on. Like it's the last thing when you're super anxious. But if you had to choose between one or the other, think about it through an executive function lens. What are the goals that we're trying to achieve? And so a lot of counseling is more about the exploration of why, Why do I feel this way? Why do I think this way? Why do my thoughts go down this line? It's really a self-exploration resource of trying to root out the why behind behaviors or thought processes. Coaching is much more action oriented. It's a lot more like getting in there, doing the work together, doing the planning. It's more of the how. And so it really is a personal interest. Now, what I would really say is let's go back to it and talk to the student. What do they want? What are they open to? Do they want counseling? Do they understand what it is? Would they rather coaching? It all goes back to like we can try to steer the ship as much as possible, but when they're under 18, they should be right next to you, seeing you steer that ship and being a part of the process. And I would say really the gap there is asking them. Because at the end of the day, they probably that particular vignette probably would have benefited from either, right? And so whichever they want is the one I'd say they benefit more from because there's buy-in.
I think it's a good question to discuss. Good choice, Jake. I've noticed that I'll have a lot of clients come to me with the work that they have to do is that self-reflection piece and that metacognition. And they're okay working with a coach or an executive function tutor, but they're not yet ready to work with a therapist. And we'll kind of start the self-reflection work and the connecting of the dots. And then maybe a couple months down the road or a year down the road, they're like, okay, maybe I should be exploring this further with a counselor or a therapist. So that's actually a fairly common trajectory that I see with a lot of my clients. And then I also think, like Jake mentioned, it is a Venn diagram. I think we've talked about this in some of our case conferences at NESCA. We like to kind of separate out the body or the brain into different parts, and really there is no separation. So it is difficult to tease apart what part of this is mental health and what part of this is executive functioning or action oriented issues. And I think if the more collaboration that can happen, if there is an aspect of mental health, the better. And I always make sure to speak with my clients to see if I can work together if they are seeing a therapist. And if it is a more serious mental health issue, to kind of take guidance from the mental health provider and then see where the executive function skill building can fit in that overall treatment plan that they have with their counselor or therapist.
And I do think sometimes it's both. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree. You're going to say what I'm saying.
Sometimes it's both, and we're lucky at NESCA because we have social work, we have counseling services. So, and we can sort of, I don't want to say pass a student around, but it is a little bit of that, right? Like when the student is ready to be sort of processing the emotions in a deeper way, building coping skills, that's the right moment is when the student is willing to do the counseling work, and sometimes they're doing coaching and the emotional piece is just so big that it's getting in the way. And so it's like, you have to do the counseling first. Sometimes they can do both,
And also just to
Casey, the most important part, I think, of that is something that Jasmine mentioned earlier in terms of collaboration, because I think the worst case scenario is if you have a coaching model going on and a therapeutic model going on, and they're working at cross purposes. And so, part of our case management model, and I imagine this is true everywhere, is we try to make sure that we're also interfacing. We try to have the trust and relationship with the student and the family to be able to collaborate with the therapist. So we're not spending time duplicating efforts, and everyone can kind of stay in their same lane, and we can maximize the efficiency of the process. But I think the most challenging part is if a therapist is working on something that you're trying to work on a different strategy at the same time. It just doesn't work very well.
And it also is about working with organizations that are ethical. So if someone's coming to you for coaching without counseling in place, you really want to make sure you trust the organization to navigate understanding boundaries, because they shouldn't be providing therapeutic support when they're not therapeutic. Now, just to use those examples, there can be stigma around therapy. I don't want to talk about these things. I just want the action. I want the concrete. And I've worked with someone, it's just so poignant. It happened last week, where For 3 years, he stopped therapy. Desperately needed therapy throughout it. But the final buildup, just graduated college, starting the career search, I had to help them understand where therapy would help that I couldn't. And so, why couldn't we research jobs, not apply, just research anxiety? Why are we so paralyzed making social plans with people? Anxiety. It's my anxiety. I'm like, then I can't help with it, right? That's a problem that I am not the best resource for. And he just got back into therapy last week. Like, and so that is balancing where I could have dragged this on for years, right? Oh, just become reliant on me, keep doing coaching, but it wasn't solving what he was facing as an issue. But he on the spectrum needed to learn, oh, that's what therapy's for. Like it didn't make sense. Therapy never clicked as a resource and what it was trying to address. And that's part of that problem solving of actually helping make that connection. Hey, what you're feeling right now, anxious for no reason, that you can't look up 3 jobs and just like take notes on what the job postings are, that's anxiety. That's problematic. And do you see that as something that you want to work on? Yeah, I don't want to feel this way. Great. Got therapy back in place. So sometimes that's the missing piece as well of what is the actual problem. I don't like talking about mental health as a problem, but what are we trying to solve with this resource of counseling? Too often it's just here's counseling, right? And it's not rooted in a why.
Yeah, what
I
they
wish we could get
thank
to
you for
all of
letting
these
me ask the
questions.
question.
Yeah, I wish we could get to all the questions. Do we have time for one more quick one, Kelly, or do we have
Yeah,
to
I think we could do
wrap
one
up?
quick.
Okay. So Trina asks, if you could only afford one, which is more effective for an ADHD kid, good A student with weaker social skills and anxiety, a summer bridge program, or an EF coach? I'm just going to say a few things about this, and you folks probably have some opinions as well. One is that there's going to be a lot of potential resources in college that are not going to cost extra money that could be helpful for these issues, including mental health counseling, joining clubs, possibly getting a peer mentor. When I say clubs, there are mental health clubs, there are neurodiversity clubs. So, finding not just a peer mentor, but a faculty mentor. So, think about, again, looking into a range of resources in college. In terms of paying for these services, if a student is a client of vocational rehab, they might be able to get a summer bridge program paid for. I've seen that happen a bunch of times. If I had to choose, one program that's 2 or 3 weeks versus an EF coach over months or years, I would go for the longer service, but ideally I wouldn't have to choose.
I think the piece to me that's pretty striking is just that it is incredibly difficult to replicate college, outside of being in college. And so I do think there's such an incredible value to, and I know it's paying for a service, but paying for a service while your student is participating in college, making sure that you've paid for this, because there are supports available on the college campus, but so many of these students need the hand-holding, which isn't literal hand-holding, sometimes it's virtual hand-holding from a lot of our organizations, but they need that remote person who's going to help them to know which resources to go get acquainted with on the college campus, to make sure that they are setting up those first appointments with disability support, academic coaching, other services on campus. So I do think, like, I would often want to pay for the support that's while the student's in college, because otherwise the student's not going to be able to anticipate the help they need, and you're not going to be able to help get them as connected on the campus. But the summer bridge provides some other really important options, like living away from home practice. They are different in some different ways.
Yeah, and I didn't for a second mean to imply that you should just use the on-campus services and not hire one of these companies. You folks all do great things, but
I wasn't thinking that. Yeah.
The issue of cost came up in a bunch of different questions for what it's worth.
Absolutely. And I think issue of cost is so important also to think about in the college selection piece of this, and sometimes thinking about plans that include lower cost college participation initially, and then transition to higher cost colleges later while students are mastering some of the skills they need. I don't know how much you promote that, Eric, but I often talk about, with students starting in community college or starting with some of these support programs to get some of the college classes under belt before sticking large amounts of tuition into a college that a student may not yet have the skills to participate in. But that's just something I think about.
I think that's
Absolutely.
that's so important, because the one thing that we didn't touch on too much is transitions. When you transition a lot of things all at once, it's harder to orient yourself. You don't have consistency. But if you slowly roll out that transition, so I saw a question about like going away before college. That's helping transition independent living skills versus transitioning social skills. And so for a lot of people where there's concern, I'm like, well, do we want to gamble with $50,000 a year, $70,000 a year? Or do we want to take community college classes for one semester and focus on the academic transition first? And that could be the other thing, that if you are thinking of finances in a private institution, understanding that, yes, that could be great if they're successful, right? So you might go down spending a lot of money at the prestigious university or the more expensive private university that we know if they just could put in the effort, they succeed, right? Versus there's some great community college options. You can take some of those savings to get one of these support programs and then transfer into the college once you get those supports in place. So it doesn't have to be like a black or white. Let me find a school, high tuition, but it has all the services. There are other ways of getting to that same end goal, and it could look different and be unique for each individual.
And
That's a good point.
Jake and Grant, if you have other comments, you can make them until about 8:35. I know people can drop off if they need to get going. I put up this thank you slide mostly because it has Jane's email address on here. I know that's just one email address, but if you want to get in touch with any of us on the panel, feel free to first, shoot your email, shoot your question to Jane. She can pass it on to the appropriate speaker. I don't know if our contact information is in the slides. If it's not, we can add our contact information to the final set of slides that gets emailed out to guests. But Jake or Grant, if you want to say anything else about the summer program options, because you guys actually offer summer programs, you may have something to say that the rest of us aren't thinking about.
Go for it, Grant.
I'm not sure I have much to add other than I think that's the more practice, obviously the more reality that you're going to experience. And I would say, our summer program is, at least ours or any, frankly, summer program is, you can't expect that there's going to be a ton of skill building, but what you can expect is that a student will demonstrate kind of similar patterns of what will likely happen in the fall. And that's what you're going for with a summer experience, is to identify what's going to happen before it starts happening. So therefore you already have a plan, and you already have, and you have the students buy-in. And so this is the value. I think when we're talking about our summer experience, it's really about developing the relationships that will allow us to say the hard things later, or to serve a student later, because it's the relationship that makes the magic work.
100%. Same thing. For Mansfield Hall, our residential summer program is actually tied to the academic year enrollment. So it's not a standalone offering. It is how we start college, which is with a 6-7 week bridge to college summer program. In the virtual hall model, we provide a 4-week bridge to college summer program as well, but only in a digital format. Again, not as a standalone, but as support services, assessment, evaluation, and a ramp and runway into the fall term academic experience for all the reasons that Grant just shared.
Yeah, I'll lastly agree with Jake in that the majority of our students who do the summer do the fall, and there's a reason for that, right? There is a continuum there, because a summer standalone is only as good as that information being applied later. And if there's no connection between who's going to be applying it, it becomes a little bit easier for it to fall away.
Great. Thank you. so very much, Casey and Jasmine and Grant and Jake, and especially Eric for helping to moderate and for all of your insightful kickoff commentary and getting us through those scenarios. And thank you to everybody who took time to log on this evening and hear from us. And I just really enjoyed working with all of you this evening. So thank you so much. And so to everyone on the call and at home, hope you have a good night or good morning, depending on where you are. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.